my name is Jo Swinson. I am the Director of Equal Power Consulting, and I am writing a book called Equal Power, which will be published in early 2018. And I was a Member of Parliament for 10 years, and for 3 years a Minister in the coalition government in the Department of Business. Undoubtedly, Twitter is my favourite social media platform. It's the one that I've really been using for the longest and spend the most time on. I joined back in 2008. I was one of the first MPs to be on Twitter and really enjoyed experimenting with it as a sort of new form of engagement, tweeting Prime Minister's questions live back in the days when that was sort of frowned upon by other members of Parliament who had a bit of a dim view of all of this newfangled smartphone rubbish. And I really enjoy Twitter for its immediacy, for the brevity of Twitter, and also the sort of curation of randomness that you can put together in your Twitter stream. So I've got everything from HR to a bit of political commentary, feminism and equality campaigners, and then random stuff like pictures of Scottish mountains and the science porn account, which has little nuggety facts about science, which just make you think differently. So I love that about Twitter. I'm on Facebook, but I've been sort of off and on with it. I'm on LinkedIn, which is quite good professionally, but it's a bit hard to get excited about, I find. And the other one that I'm just experimenting with is Instagram, which I'm still fairly new to, but I am enjoying Instagram, particularly because it's making me think about images differently and experimenting with, what makes a great picture and how to communicate through imagery. So those are the different social media platforms that I use. I think using social media can be really helpful for leaders in terms of connecting. And I've certainly found that when I was a Member of Parliament, I was able to connect directly with some constituents through social media. As a minister, I would find on issues like employment law that there was a whole kind of Twitter employment law community online where, again, I could get that sort of direct connection. And in researching my book, I find that the sort of equality campaigners on Twitter, I've got that direct access to. So I think that it's particularly good for connecting. And, for chief executives, it's really hard sometimes for them to know what's going on in the shop floor of their business, what their customers are thinking. And I think Twitter and other social media networks can be really helpful for just bridging that gap and putting people in touch with one another. And then I suppose separately, particularly in a political sphere, having that kind of campaign platform, the ability to mobilise people, whether it's in campaigning, whether it's in signing petitions, but that ability of social media to bring people together and get them excited about something also, I think, is really helpful for people who are trying to lead a movement of change. So I've used social media in a variety of organisations. I'm now chairing the CIPD Policy Forum, and CIPD is pretty engaged in social media. Obviously, for a long time, I was a Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament, and the way in which political parties engage with social media can be quite different, and obviously has to take into account the realities of the fact that you've got different tribes of politics, if you like, online. Though I do think the Lib Dem press account is normally quite good at being able to develop a bit of a sense of humour and not be too serious and not take themselves too seriously on Twitter. And I think that's one of the things which there's a bit more personality that is injected into social media. But I think across the organisations I've worked in, I think the common factor is that people's use of social media is very much dependent on whether they individually like doing it. You can all see the Twitter accounts that are basically sending out, the corporate press releases or the line to take. And that doesn't really engage anyone. But yet in all sorts of organisations, you will get people who are just really good at engaging, understanding the sort of the narrative and the personality that a particular organisation needs to have online, and engaging with people, in that way. And I found that in politics as much as I find in business, that it's much more dependent on the individuals than about the overall organisation. And I think that it is a problem if organisations are too prescriptive about saying, everybody must be on this network or that network and doing X or Y. While yes, it makes sense if you're, a professional to have a LinkedIn profile, how people engage with social media is actually a pretty personal choice for them to make. Social media can be great, but there are downsides as well. One of the biggest downsides is the sheer volume versus time conundrum. And particularly if people's expectations are that everything they send will be responded to. And I found as a politician that could be quite difficult to manage, particularly if there was a few days where I was intensely busy in a bill committee, then perhaps doing question time, and then I would find that I would have hundreds and hundreds of mentions, and in fact sometimes you wouldn't even be clear that you'd been able to see everything because you'd scrolled through but it hadn't showed you everything, and it could be hard to keep track of. So I think that volume issue is one which partly needs to be resolved actually by managing expectations, that you will try to engage, but you cannot give a guarantee that every single thing that somebody says to you on social media will automatically get a response. And you need to have a different mechanism where people, if they want a guaranteed response, can send an email or a letter or some other way of contact. I think there's also this echo chamber difficulty. It's really easy for people to look at their social media and think that the whole world thinks the same way that they do. And we saw it in 2014 with the independence referendum in Scotland, where many fervent supporters of independence just could not believe the result. They literally questioned whether it was fair because everybody they knew or they thought they spoke to was backing independence. And you see the same things in the Trump election in terms of the Brexit debate here in this country, where people have their own communities that are populated by others that believe the same thing. And I think that's in itself quite dangerous. It's helpful if we come across different viewpoints, and that we can make sure that different people's ideas are taken into account. The other thing I would say is that the abuse can be a downside. So it's the sort of opposite of the echo chamber, that you almost get deluged with people just shouting you down, and that particularly is an issue in politics for people in the public eye. Interestingly, when I stopped being an MP, it was like somebody had just turned off a tap, and this sort of steady stream of abuse that was daily and would peak if I'd ever been on the television almost came to a halt. And I now really notice it if I do something like a paper review on Sky last summer, where I criticised Nigel Farage's comments saying that migrants were all rapists, and suddenly I had this torrent of Islamophobic, in that case, Twitter abuse. I use social media regularly to connect with stakeholders. Done that for constituents and for people who were involved in the different industries and areas that I was legislating on and taking policy decisions on as a minister. And sometimes I've done that directly through @replies on Twitter, by retweeting people, by following different accounts so that I can see what different stakeholder groups are saying. Sometimes I've done that very explicitly with things like Twitter Q&As, or having an hour where I say I'm going to be online and able to answer questions on this particular issue. And that kind of approach can be helpful if volume's an issue, because it means that people aren't expecting to get you all the time, but you are making yourself available to people nonetheless. And so I think a mix of these different tools has proved, I've found it's proved very effective, and particularly because people are often surprised to get a response and to have somebody in a high profile position engage with them on social media, and people do appreciate it. In terms of using social media for the first time, maybe you're signed up to a couple of platforms but you haven't spent a lot of time on it, I would say, first of all, spend a bit of time playing with it and getting familiar with it. Follow other people, watch what they do, get a bit of a feel for how it works, and you will, over time, develop your own style. And I would just say the number one piece of advice I would give would be to be authentic, to be yourself. just sounding like the corporate line does not work on social media. There's no benefit in doing that. But being able to show a little bit more of yourself, and it doesn't need to be, tweeting pictures of every single thing you eat, but just being able to show a little bit of the human side and to be yourself, I think is something which is very much appreciated by others on social media, and helps it to be somewhere where you can enjoy and you can feel like you're being yourself and engaging in that authentic way.